Good afternoon. Welcome to My Senior Moments. Earlier this year, I took about 3 weeks and traveled to the northern Yucatán Peninsula. My intent was to go visit some of the cities, some of the Mayan sites, and a few islands. I had been to the Yucatán about 25 years ago, but just passed through on my way to Belize. So this would be really my first time spending any amount of time in the area. Unintentionally, I didn't realize that Carnival was also going on during the time when I was going to travel. When I got there, I really enjoyed the Carnival activities, and they really made my trip even more enjoyable. I hope you enjoy the video. The Yucatán Peninsula borders Belize and Guatemala and is also bordered by the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico. I was only traveling for 3 weeks, so I could take my carry-on backpack and it had plenty of room. After spending a night in the city of Cancun, I decided to take the ferry over to Isla Mujeres, a small island not too far from Cancun in the Gulf of Mexico. Isla Mujeres is a small island, only about 1.5 square miles, and it extends north to south, kind of a thin island. You can walk from the east to west, but to go north to south, you need to have transportation, as it's too far to walk. The main urban area where the ferries let people off and most of the hotels and shops are is in the far northern end, and that's where I decided to stay for a few days and explore on foot. But after a couple days I rented a moped, which helped me to get to the southern parts of the island and explore more of the beaches and areas outside of the urban tourist zone. During the day, Isla Mujeres is full of people, day trippers coming from Cancun and other areas in the inland, and but they all leave by dark, and in the evening, Isla Mujeres becomes much more, in my mind, user-friendly. You can see a lot of the locals out and about, and you realize that Isla Mujeres is actually a community and not just a tourist zone. I really enjoyed a lot of the young people who were practicing for Carnival, which was coming up, and also just watching daily activities like this basketball game was really enjoyable. I tend to shy away from the tourist bars, but I did find this local bar that I went to a couple times because they had great music and kind of a mixture of locals and tourists, and it just had a really good vibe, even though it wasn't right on the beach. After enjoying Isla Mujeres for a few days, I went inland, grabbed a bus, and headed towards Isla Holbox, which I had not heard a whole lot about, but it sounded really interesting. So I went to the little town of Yucata, which is where you catch the ferries to go over to Isla Holbox. I was really looking forward to go to Isla Holbox because it's kind of off the tourist radar to a certain extent. It's only a few hours from Cancun, but most people that go to Cancun had never heard of it. And I realized that there weren't cars on the island. It was mostly a nature preserve with a small urban area, limited growth, small sized buildings, and so it sounded just perfect for what I was looking to spend a few days. I've dabbled in land use planning and environmental conservation my entire career, so I was encouraged to see that the Mexican government and that the local governments were moving forward with land use laws and zoning and environmental conservation to protect the island and much of its habitat and not have it become a second Cancun. Isla Holbox is about a 20-minute ferry ride from the mainland, and the island itself is about 40 square miles, very narrow, about a mile wide. The thing you notice there's no paved roads, no cars. The buildings are maybe 2 stories. There's really no high rises, no overdevelopment of chained large scale hotels and resorts. Isla Holbox doesn't have the diurnal influx of people coming on ferries like Isla Mujeres. Most people come here and they're going to stay 1 or 2 days, since it is about a 2 or 3 hour ride from Cancun or any other major city. I was able to get a small studio apartment right near the center of town. The studio apartment's associated with a hostel. The staff at the hostel were very helpful in giving me directions and giving me information about things to do and places to go, and everything you really want to know about the island. They were very helpful for me to enjoy my stay. The island is expensive compared to much of Mexico, but it is an island. So it's cheaper than many of the resorts, and I didn't find it overly pricey myself. There are wonderful restaurants and great food that you wouldn't expect to find on a small island like this, but it's definitely a place to go if you enjoy great food, nice restaurants, and shops and boutiques. It's not overly developed, like I said, and my hope is that it stays that way, but I know what reality is, and every year I'm sure it'll change some more. Isla Holbox had street food, of course, as much of Mexico does, which is delicious, but I was also very surprised to see how many vegan restaurants were on the island. And I sampled a number of them, which were very good vegan food. It's the same or better than what you would get in California or in Oregon, where I live. When I got to Isla Holbox, I realized that I was traveling during Carnival. Carnival is a holiday that's celebrated in South and Central America and Mexico. It's a 5-day, usually a 5-day celebration that takes place before Ash Wednesday. And so I was on the island during Carnival. And I had traveled before. I'd been in Ecuador in 2015 during Carnival, so I was fully aware that it's quite the celebration, and I was pretty excited. I unintentionally came to the island during Carnival, and I really enjoyed it. It was, I have to say, it was probably too much fun for me. Early in the afternoon, you'd see people getting together in the street and getting ready for the afternoon and the evening festivities. And most of the carnival celebrations for the young folks, let's say, was all in the afternoons until the early evening. And so you can see all different ages. Of course, all the dancers are females, and all the musicians
were males. I guess that's part of the machismo of Mexico. But real fun to watch the whole community involved.
For a small island with only about 1,200 residents, it seemed like all 1,200 of them were out. There were groups of dancers and musicians on every corner, every street. You'd walk down around one block and there'd be another group playing and singing, and people watching and dancing and drinking, of course, outside. And I was just having a great time. It's just such a wonderful culture. The people were also open and friendly, and it's just something I guess I don't see all the time in my home of the United States. So it was really enjoyable. Although Carnival took much of the town and all the side streets and all, a lot of the downtown area were still involved with people playing basketball and hanging out in the park, going out to eat and dinner and just exploring the town and the shops. So there was a lot of activity going on while I was there. There are beautiful murals on the sides of many of the buildings on Isla Olbash. You can pick up a map there that designates a walking tour to go see all of them, which I highly recommend if you go to the island. To get around the island, you can either rent or hire one of the many golf carts that are available, but I prefer to walk or else use a bicycle that was available from the hostel to get me to areas that were a little further away from town. Mi amigo, ¿cómo está? ¿Necesita comida? Tú es muy bonita. Muy bonita. Pero paro. This guy looked pretty healthy, but there are feral dogs and other animals on the island, as there are all throughout Mexico and probably all throughout the world. And on Isla Olbash, there is a animal refuge on the island, which works to place animals into foster care or into permanent care. So if you're there, go visit them and make sure you donate some money to them as well. I'm concerned about mass ecotourism and the effects that it has on the environment and the natural world. However, I did take a 3-island tour, which is available through most agencies and hotels on the island. And there's quite a few people that take these tours, and there is an impact out there on the environment. I probably prefer if they scaled it back somewhat, but that's a topic for another day probably. I did go on this tour, and it was nice to get out into the mangroves and look at some of the natural areas, the undeveloped areas, I should say, on the island, and the bird life and the wildlife. Isla Holbox is located where the Caribbean Sea meets the Gulf of Mexico. There's a lot of white sand beaches, very nice soft sand, a lot of seaweed that washes up on the shore. It's windy here and very popular for windsurfing, and the winds blow quite a bit. The ocean waters are not clear, so it's not good for snorkeling. There's a lot of other recreation around, cenotes, and of course just lounging on the beach, and one of my favorites is to watch the sunset. Well, my time is coming to an end on Holbox. I wanted to move on and explore other areas of the Yucatan, although I could have stayed here much longer. I was fortunate enough to get the last seat on the last bus of the day, leaving Chilicua for Valladolid. Valladolid is a wonderful city a few hours south of Isla Holbox. I got a very nice hotel in the Central Historical District where I settled down for the night and prepared myself to explore the city for a few days. I found that Valladolid had many good restaurants, including vegan restaurants, similar to what I found up in Isla Holbox, although I did not find very many street food vendors. It was mostly sit-down restaurant style. There are many historic areas in the city. I stayed in one called Calzado de los Friales. It was a block long with many historic buildings, 1 or 2 stories, hotels and restaurants, small shops. It was very pleasant, not many cars on the street. There was also a number of churches and cathedrals in the city, a few of them centered around the main central park that was called Francisco Canton Rosado. The park was very pleasant, and as expected, there's a lot of people that would be hanging out in the park. They also had these very interesting benches, which I saw throughout Mexico, the Yucatan, and the intent of the benches is to get people to talk to each other. You'd sit facing each other as opposed to side, and although I did see people sitting in these chairs on their cell phone, the seats definitely encourage face-to-face conversation. Valladolid is a compact colonial city with about a population around 50,000 people. I decided to rent a bicycle and ride out of town to a cenote, which was about a half an hour bike ride. Cenotes are sinkholes in limestone with cool, fresh water. There's about 6,000 of them in the Yucatan, and on my trip I visited 3 or 4 of them. lot of fun. Very wonderful day trip if you get a chance. This cenote is called San Lorenzo Ashman, and I couldn't resist taking a rope and swinging into the water. Near my hotel is the convent of San Bernardino de Siena, an old Franciscan building that was built during the conquistador days. In Valladolid, as I noticed in a couple other cities, on the historic buildings at night, they perform what is called video mapping, which is basically a light show that tells a historical tale of the city. Very well done and mesmerizing to watch.
Las tropas defensoras arrojan sus armas al cenote para que no puedan ser utilizadas por los mayas, dejando a sus espaldas y en abandono a su hermosa ciudad.
Well, wandering around the city, I happened to run into my friend Maria from the Mapache hostel in Isla Olbash, and we decided the next day to take a colectivo up to the Mayan ruins of Ekbalam. Ekbalam is a moderately sized Mayan city. At its height was around the year 800. It's not as heavily touristed as some of the other Mayan sites, such as Chichen Itza or the Mayan ruins at Tulum. Ekbalam is well developed for tourists. Most of the ruins have been excavated. The price of admission is a little steep compared to some smaller sites. There's a cenote near Ekbalam. It's a separate price to get in, but it's well worth it, especially if you're there on a hot day like I was. The cool water was really refreshing and reinvigorated me. I stayed in the city for a few days and walked around, eating at restaurants, visiting various shops and boutiques, and then I decided to continue on my trip west to the city of Mérida. Mérida is the largest city in the Yucatán. There are approximately 1 million people that live in Mérida and the surrounding areas. Mérida has many museums, art galleries, and facilities for tourists. Mérida has a large historical district, but it's very walkable, and a lot of old churches and buildings. Many of the buildings, including this one, were constructed with old Mayan ruins, and you can see some of the rocks on the side of the building that have Mayan symbols on them. I could have spent many days in Mérida, but my time was running short and I wanted to go visit the Amarillo city of Izamal. Izamal is a small city where many of the buildings, most of the buildings, are painted in a shade of yellow. I was able to get a room in the front upstairs of this historic hotel that was on one of the main plazas. Izamal is a small city of about 15,000 inhabitants. Virtually all of the buildings and housing in the center part of the city are a shade of yellow or gold. Many of the cities in the Yucatan, including Izamal, are built on top of Mayan ruins. The conquistadors used the ruins to build their buildings and also to dominate Christianity over the Mayan religion.
They're doing a video light show on my hotel. That is my room right above, the balcony right above the door. I needed to work my way back towards the coast, so I took a bus to the Mayan Riviera resort town of Tulum.
Carnival was still being celebrated, so I got to enjoy more music and a parade. Tulum is very spread out. There's a mile or more distance between the main town, the beach area and resorts, the Mayan ruins, and nearby cenotes. So I decided to rent a little motor scooter for a few days. For visitors, Tulum is a tale of two cities. The downtown area where I stayed has cheaper hotels, restaurants, boutiques, and shops, and the commercial center. About a mile away is the ocean with a beautiful beach lined by boutique hotels, very small and very pricey. Approximately a mile or two north of the resorts in Tulum are the ruins of the Mayan city of Tulum. The Mayan city of Tulum is a walled port city. It was at its peak between the years 1300 and 1500. My trip was coming to an end. I needed to work my way back up to Cancun. The coronavirus was starting to accelerate here. It was the first week of March. So I put on my mask, got my luggage, got on the airplane, and flew back to Oregon. Well, it's been about 9 months since I took the trip to the northern Yucatan. I would really like to go back and explore some more of Mexico, even go back to the Yucatan since there's many areas that I didn't get to, and some areas I'd like to spend more time at. But with COVID-19, we're deep into it still. It's probably going to be a few months, if not longer, before I return back. So until I see you next time, I hope you enjoyed this video and my senior moment. Ciao.